Hey guys, what is up? So today we are diving into Rachel Leviss podcast called Rachel Goes Rogue. And I thought I'd mention here that every single week that Rachel posts an episode, I will be summarizing it. So with that being said, let's get right into the video because she definitely spills the tea. So Rachel used to be Raquel, and she introduces herself as Rachel Savannah Leviss. Her real name has always been Rachel, but she does share with us later on in the episode that it wasn't until she was the age of 6 or 7 where she decided she wanted to become Raquel because she felt like she wanted to create another personality, a better one. Now, Rachel does realize that her having this podcast is basically opening up the door for more scrutiny, and she's just kind of at this point where it's like, look, people are going to talk about me. Vanderpump Rules airs January 30th of this year, 2024. And she didn't want to be in this situation where Vanderpump Rules, anyone from the cast can talk all this crap about her. And she doesn't have a platform to respond to the criticism. So if she's going to be scrutinized, at least she'd be able to tell her truth in the process. I will admit the first 5 minutes of this podcast, I wasn't really sure if there was going to be a future one because Rachel's voice was so shaky. I mean, she was saying she was nervous, which is normal. I mean, Rachel even goes as far as to mention that the day before filming episode 1, she almost pulled the plug on the podcast because that's how nervous she was. So I'm so glad that her team was there to guide her in the right direction, gave her some good talking points. I mean, the podcast was like an hour and 7 minutes and change long. So there was a lot of things that was discussed. So Rachel gets asked by one of the iHeartRadio producers, what made you say no to going back to season 11? And Rachel's like, look, Tom and I, we are not together. And if I went back, none of the other cast members are speaking to me. So if I went back there, I would be very vulnerable. And I'm scared that Tom and I, we would get back together. The reality is Rachel felt like she would be forced to interact with Tom, and also she didn't feel like the ladies would be open to hearing her out. And she doesn't say this, but you can feel like she felt like she would just be there because the scandal, it caused like huge promotion for the show. I mean, the ratings went up tremendously, right? So she just didn't feel like going back to the show would benefit her in any way. Rachel then gets asked, did you ever consider going back with Tom? And she's like, yes. So while I went to treatment, Tom and I, we talked every single day on the phone. We were together for 7 months. But she realized in treatment that the relationship that she had with Tom was obviously an unhealthy one, and she's trying to stem away from the unhealthy relationships. Rachel knew that her main focus needed to be, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself in these unhealthy relationships? And of course, the next question is, well, why did you do that? And Rachel's response is that, of course, she put Tom on this pedestal, but the reality is that Tom gave her the attention that she's never received before. Tom gave her validation in a way where she felt very adored, admired, felt valued as a person. When you hear someone say that, though, there is a part of me that thinks, okay, like you really do need help, because all that says is that you feel very, very insecure in yourself. The fact that you need someone for validation is proof, it's evidence that you're severely insecure. So I'm really glad that she found treatment, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. I mean, everyone makes mistakes, because let's be real, this is not the first time we've seen on these reality TV shows of a couple having an affair. Rachel goes on to say that she has a pattern of putting these guys on a pedestal and neglecting her friends in the process. She makes her life all about this one person, which she says is obviously unhealthy. Season 10, she was drinking a lot, numbing her anxiety and pain. She even talks about grieving that relationship with James. Because if you remember, when Rachel broke off the engagement, 3 weeks later, James met someone else and was like calling this person the love of his life. And Rachel goes, that was really hard to deal with, and I didn't know how to, so I was also drinking away that pain as well. She even shares with us that her attraction to Tom was somewhat perfect because she knew that Tom couldn't emotionally be in a relationship, and she knew she couldn't date anyone at the time because she was still grieving from James. So let's be real though, Tom was not emotionally and physically available, but she knew Tom wasn't available, and that was perfect because she was also able to benefit from being in a relationship with someone without actually being in a relationship with someone. Rachel does share with us that the social situations that she had with the cast caused her to drink as well. And she does admit that she really needed a therapist, but instead she leaned on Tom. I mean, she even goes on to say that Tom Sandoval, he was really there for her. And the producers ask her, was he really there for you? And Rachel's like, after filming, he would come over, we would sit on my balcony, and we would talk about the struggles of the fight or situation that we had just filmed. And it was a very unique situation because, there's not that many people that are on reality TV shows, and so it was nice to communicate the struggles and talk about the people who we disliked. So, and then they would always FaceTime with each other. We know how that ended. But overall, Rachel at the time did feel as if Tom Sandoval was there for her. Rachel then gets asked by one of the producers, do you think the relationship you had with Tom, was that genuine? And Rachel believes that she definitely thought that there were some truths to their relationship. And although she can't speak for Tom, she does feel that there were some parts of the relationship where it was genuine. She felt like there were moments where they did have a connection. But in that same sentence, Rachel also states that she does believe that there was also some healing on Tom's end as well, because Tom would be telling her like, hey, I'm going to break up with Ariana. We're going to therapy. I'm going to break up with her in therapy. He would be telling her like they don't have no intimacy whatsoever. And even the producers, they ask her, did you ever question Ariana on anything Tom told you about their relationship? And Rachel's like, yeah, there was that episode where I did ask Ariana, are you and Tom intimate? So there were conversations where Rachel did question whether or not Tom was lying to her or not. Raquel or Rachel, they do share that if they could go back, they would definitely do things differently, but she would also tell Tom Sandoval that he would have to decide. He would have to make a choice. She does wish that she would have just put her foot down. She felt like she was waiting patiently for so long. It was a 7-month relationship. Rachel explains that being on the show in a relationship with Tom and then saying hi to Ariana in the morning the next day, how she viewed it was, or it felt like she was dating Tom in the future. Like she was dating Tom Sandoval in the future without Ariana. That's how she described it. She felt like it was a different world, especially looking back when she watches these episodes. For sure, she views season 10 as the worst version of herself. Now, Rachel does state in this podcast that she's not trying to make any excuses, but she always was a good girl, followed the rules. And after her pageant era, she didn't have that ceiling over her anymore, and she started going wild. She was also coming out of her people-pleasing era. She explains that when she was in a relationship with James on the show, she met James when she was 21 and she's currently 29. So, being engaged to James, she felt like she was such a people pleaser. She wouldn't drink as much at that time because she was trying to make sure James didn't drink, and she felt like she had to not really express herself the way that she liked to. She would always have to edit her behaviors because she felt like if she couldn't do that, her and James, they wouldn't be able to maintain their relationship. And I think as a viewer watching the show, I always felt like, if I'm being honest, Rachel was in that relationship to be on Vanderpump Rules. That was just my honest take on it. But I didn't know that was Rachel's first real relationship. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Because she was getting criticized a lot. I believe Lala in one reunion criticized Rachel for only dating James because she wanted to be on the show, because James was treating her like crap. So it's very interesting hearing that James was her first real relationship. The episode then goes into talks about insecurity issues. Rachel does share that she's always been the tallest girl in her class, and she changed her name, which I think I stated earlier in this video. She started changing her name from Rachel to Raquel at the age of 6 to 7. She was always very an insecure person, and then one of the producers, they're like, so Rachel, you have this wall build up, it's really hard to get anything out of you. Were you like this with everyone? Were you like this on the show? And Rachel's like, after this scandal, I've been really, I've been very careful on who I share my information with, because Rachel shares that she hasn't always been able to tell friends everything because then they leak it to the media. So then Leviss gets asked, when you're out in public, when people do recognize you, do they treat you nicely? How does that? And Rachel's like, when people do recognize me, they do talk about mental health, and they praise her for sharing her mental health journey. And then there are some horrible interactions, like David Portnoy from Barstool Sports. I believe I'm saying his last name correctly. Rachel was in Chicago visiting her recovery friends and took a photo with a few people. And I guess apparently the place where she was taking the photos, people realized that David Portnoy from Barstool Sports was also at that location. I guess there were reports around that time that David and his girlfriend, they broke up, and people were saying the reason was because of Rachel Leviss. And then this is what David had to say. They kind of read it on the podcast, and I will read it here. I can confirm I never met that trash bag in my life, and it's wildly insulting to even be mentioned in the same sentence as her. And Rachel's response, which I thought was pretty funny, is she's like, I've been learning a lot about projection. And she's like, look, I know I'm not a trash bag. Going through this scandal has definitely made me have a thick skin, because she does get asked, do you deal with hate better now that you've gone through this scandal? And she's like, this scandal has made me so thick. I have such tough skin. What people say really doesn't bother me anymore. I mean, she does have some friends that she's had to let go because she's learned that she couldn't trust them. They put her information out there on social media. Rachel does point out one friend that she saw their TikTok, and it was regarding the whole David Portnoy Barstool Sports scandal. Apparently the friend said something along the lines of, this better not be true, and Rachel's like, why make a TikTok when you could have just called me? So during the scandal, Rachel definitely learned who her true friends were. Now, guys, listening to Rachel, you could definitely tell there was a lot of self-growth, because one of the producers, they were like, what would you say to David Portnoy, if he was here right now, something along those lines? And she dodges the question. She's like, oh, I'm not really good at confrontation and yada, yada, yada. And it was nice, because I truly did feel like she does have her wall up. She knows that she's not trying. She doesn't want to start anything. She's aware that anything that she says, is going to be back to him. And I think that's what the producers wanted. They wanted ratings for the show, for iHeartRadio ratings. And they wanted, what Rachel said to get back to him, and then he said something on his show which makes the viewers go on her They were trying to do that game, play that game with her, and she wasn't having it, so kudos to her. So Rachel gets asked, do you talk to anyone on the show? And she's very zipped up about who she talks to. So she does admit that she does talk to some cast members, but doesn't disclose who that is. And she feels that the only reason why some cast members are reaching out to her, I think we do know that Lala did reach out to Rachel, but Rachel feels like the only reason why some of these cast members are reaching out to her is because, at the time, it was hot. The scandal was popping. I mean, it still is in a way. Season premieres this month as I'm filming. And she's like, listen, I'm more than open to having a conversation, to communicating with these people, but I'm not going to disclose personal information about myself that can be used towards the show, because that's really what everyone's priority is Vanderpump Rules. Everyone's trying to make their bank. But Rachel does say that she is open to having a conversation with these people once they are no longer in that environment anymore. Rachel feels like she's made the right decision in leaving. She knows that's for the best. She is curious because she will be watching season 11. Granted, it is a trigger for her, but she is trying to grow. I mean, she's going to therapy weekly. She has a plan in place on how this show is not going to be a trigger because she wants to be able to have her own business, to start this podcast, to be successful, right? But in order to do that, she has to conquer her triggers, her fears, and etc. So anyways, Rachel says that going into season 11, she is going to watch the show, but because she left and took herself out of the equation with this show, Vanderpump Rules, you're going to need drama and you're going to need a villain like any other reality TV show. So she is wondering who's the villain going to be. So she's definitely looking to see that. I think it's going to be Tom because Tom is still there. I mean, let's be real. But what's also interesting, Rachel shared that when she had just gotten out of treatment, production was trying to get her back on the show. It didn't work. She was leaving the show. And at the time when they were negotiating, they wanted Rachel to show up in Tahoe, which is interesting because in Tahoe, the episode we did not see yet, in Tahoe, that's when Lisa Vanderpump reveals the dog Graham, that's Rachel's dog. Graham was raised by Rachel and James when they were together. So now we get into the dog situation. So for Rachel's graduation, she was gifted a mini golden doodle. And although Graham was trained, apparently he had a biting problem. Rachel goes on to say that James was definitely not a good dog owner, period. She goes into details explaining that he would antagonize Graham, kick him off the couch while he was sleeping, when he would not be expecting it, so that would shock Graham. And James would encourage Graham to bite his hands, which wasn't really great because then that just encouraged Graham to bite people. Although Graham has gone through training, even after the breakup, Graham has bitten a few people, and one of them including Rachel's mom. Rachel shares that Graham was with her mother while she was in treatment, and one day Rachel's mom calls and she's going to the ER, couldn't even get stitches because that's how badly Graham bit off the flesh off of her hands. So that's when I thought it was a better idea to just send Graham to a rescue facility. Long story short, the mom sends Graham to this rescue facility, says, hey, my daughter is a little celebrity right now, so please keep this on a DL. They sign over their rights and the facility takes Graham. Apparently, they had to give money to the facility to train Graham, and after Graham was trained, they found a home for Graham. Apparently, the owners brought Graham back a few days later because Graham had bitten them. And then that's when they tried to locate Rachel again. And they scanned Graham's chip and they realized, oh, she's Rachel Leviss. Oh, I thought it was dumb for the mother to disclose to the facility, oh, hey, my daughter's a celebrity, so keep this on the DL. That facility just probably scanned Graham's chip, looked at who Rachel was and was like, oh, let's call Vanderpump Dogs. Anyway, so after the owners brought Graham back to the facility because he apparently allegedly bit them, the facility stated that they scanned Graham's chip. After realizing who Rachel was, they called up Lisa Vanderpump. Lisa Vanderpump then took Graham and was like, if Graham never finds a home, he can stay on my ranch forever. And Rachel's like, Lisa doesn't have a ranch. So anyways, now we talk about Lisa Vanderpump and Rachel. So after Rachel finds out about this, that Graham is now in the possession of Lisa Vanderpump, Vanderpump Dogs. So she calls Lisa and is like, hey, Lisa, whatever you do with Graham, don't give Graham back to James because James, he's such a horrible owner and yada, yada, yada. Now, according to Rachel, the only thing Lisa cared about was getting her back on the show because Rachel goes on to say, and I believe Rachel, because Rachel doesn't have anything to lose. The fact that the best thing that could have happened to Rachel was this not be a storyline on Vanderpump Rules, because usually they have to sign all these NDAs, to try to keep the storylines a hush hush, but she hid this storyline from the show, so she has zero obligations to keep her mouth shut about anything, which is great. She does state that the producers were mad, but of course they would be mad. You get to talk freely about a storyline that they have zero control over, period. On the phone, you have Lisa Vanderpump and Rachel, and Lisa Vanderpump's like, oh, darling, how about you come and bring me some flowers and explain to me why you left Sir so abruptly? We all want you back on the show so you could tell your side of the story, darling. And, that's when Rachel admits that, a part of her wanted to come back to the show after talking to Lisa. Like, yeah, I want to explain my side of the story. I want to get it out there. But then quickly, Rachel realized that she is being played. She realized and felt that Graham was also used as like a prop to get Rachel back on the show. So ultimately, she decided to not meet up with Lisa. So after this conversation about Lisa, the episode starts swimming into talking about Tom Sandoval again. So then they play this clip of Tom talking about Rachel in a podcast interview. And Rachel's just like, I'm so over Tom. I feel like in these podcast interviews, I wish he would stick up for me. If he really did love me, if he felt anything for me, I wish he would just stick up for me. But he's not, because he knows I'm coming out with my own podcast and he's scared of what I have to say. Tom has put it out there that RACHEL Leviss made the first move, but apparently this is what really happened. One day while filming Vanderpump Rules, Raquel was having a conversation with Lisa at SUR about how she needs to stand up for herself, stick up for herself, yada, 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 right? Tom Sandoval knew at the time that Rachel was filming at SUR, so he walks into SUR, he makes a drink for Rachel. Afterwards, they hit it at another bar or restaurant, whatever. According to Rachel, she ends up driving Tom home to the place where he shares with Ariana. Apparently, allegedly, Tom could not get in the front door. I guess he lost his key or whatever. Apparently, they sat around the fire pit and the back because he couldn't get into the front or back door. Lost his key, apparently. So as they walk to the back of the house, apparently Tom says, do you know what the best thing about this pool is? That it's heated. So the two are in the pool, and apparently he grabbed her, swung her, and kissed her. After that encounter, Tom, he stepped back, sat on the steps, had a serious face of look, what have I just done? Rachel goes, oh, I should just leave. Tom's like, no, stay. I imagine it being like that soap opera, that dramatic effect from One Life to Live, starring Cole. If you know, you know. Long story short, Rachel's like, okay, but we can talk, we can have a conversation, but now I don't want to have the conversation here. Granted, Ariana is apparently in the house sleeping. So they go back into Rachel's car and the two hook up. Rachel does explain to us that she would try to end it, but every time she would, Tom Sandoval would find a way to reel her back in. She also does mention a friend, and I'm very curious on who this friend is. Do we know this friend? But she does mention a friend who knew something was up with her because Rachel was drinking a lot. And one night, this friend went up to Rachel and was like, hey, Rachel, what's really going on? Raquel, Rachel, whatever. I know something's up. What's going on? Rachel was drunk that night, so she didn't disclose anything. And Rachel's like, I'll just tell you in the morning. The next day, the friend never forgot. Rachel was hoping he would. We know, it's a he. That's what we know. We know this friend is a he. Rachel says, she's been sleeping with Tom. This friend highly disapproved. This friend was there for Rachel, but was like, you need to end things now. So I'm curious if we know who this friend is. Rachel does admit to us that the producers were not happy with her because they felt like, this could have been all on camera and it was not. But tough luck. Rachel does end the podcast by saying that she's not the first person to be involved in a relationship that wasn't handled correctly. Her story isn't unique, but broadcasted on a much larger scale. And that completes the first episode. I will be doing a summary every week of Rachel Goes Rogue, so tune in for that. But also, everyone really thought Rachel gave all the tea to Bethany Frankel, but little did they know she has a lot more to give. And I'm down for it. I mean, at what point are we just going to stop hating Rachel? I just feel like there's so many people on Bravo TV that on these reality shows that cheat all the time, okay? And at first I thought in the beginning when I was listening to this podcast, I was like, there's not going to be any future because if she don't stop with that shaky voice and she's nervous and the size, there was just so much of that in the beginning. But towards the end, I could hear her get very comfortable. I definitely see 2 or 3 more episodes in. She has this. So I'm actually pretty excited about listening to Rachel. I love the tea. I love we get to hear all the details. And the good thing about this is that anything she says, we know is true. She doesn't have any reason to lie. The only person that we know that may be lying, that may be fabricating everything is Tom Sandoval. So I'm very interested in listening and tuning in to next week's episode and then talking about it. So yeah, guys, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. But thank you guys for watching, and I will see you soon on the next video. Bye, guys.